Cultural Programme, one of the founding stones for the future Stephen A. Schwarzman Centre for the Humanities. I'm Yasmin Sidhwa, I'm Artistic Director of Mandala Theatre Company, and we're coming to you live this afternoon from the North Wall Arts Centre in Summertown, Oxford. And I'm so pleased to say that we're joined by a small live audience, and as I've said, this is our first audience in person that we've had since the pandemic began. So we're so happy to welcome them here and all of you. So we're all social distancing with safely live streaming to you wherever you are. We hope you're safe and well wherever you are in the world. Before we start the afternoon's event, I'd like to remind the online audience that you can share comments and questions in the chat on YouTube. And for you, our in-person audience, you can just raise your hand in the normal way, although I'm struggling to see, so just make sure you wave well. We hope you enjoyed Though This Be Madness. It's written by Avaes Mohammad and one of Mandala Theatre Company's shows that has taken a long time to get here. We always take a time with our research and development process to really get the lived experience of young people. So we began in 2019 and we ran creative workshops in Pupil Referral Units, schools, colleges, universities in Oxford and across the country in 5 cities. And for us, that is essential. We mix that with research from academics, and we're really grateful that the Excluded Lives team that you're going to hear from today have generously shared some of their research. And together, this work has gone into making the show that you've seen. I'm pleased now to introduce my co-chair for this afternoon's discussion, Ian Thompson.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and thank you for putting on the play this afternoon. I too miss being in the theatre. My name's Ian Thompson. I'm an Associate Professor of Education at the Department of Education, University of Oxford, and I'm also one of the co-principal investigators on a large 4-year ESRC funded project, Excluded Lives, which is looking at patterns of exclusion across the UK and essentially looking why England permanently excludes far more children, proportionally and massively in number than anywhere else in the UK. Our interest with working with Yasmin is a long time and many projects. So Excluded Lives has got a particular project at the moment. The meaning of the term was those young people who were excluded in any way from both educational and other forms of society. And so when we talked to Yasmin about her working with us, we were fortunate enough to be able to approach Torch, particularly through the Humanities Cultural Programme, who very generously provided both the funding for the initial setup of the play and also have helped all the way along in terms of putting together this venue and publicity and generally making sure that kept us on track with all the pandemic and changes that we've had to do. So I'd like to thank them very much. I'm sitting here with an iPad on my lap because I'll be looking at the live stream chat. So when people do, and please, people on live stream, please do post comments later on, and I'll be able to relay them to the panel.
So I'm going to ask the panellists now to introduce themselves. So starting over here with you, Michelle.
I'm Michelle Johnson. I'm head of the virtual school for children we care for in Oxfordshire. And our role is to support all children in care to ensure that they're in school and they achieve the very best. So exclusion is absolutely at the heart of our agenda.
Okay, thank you. TK.
Hi, I'm TK and I'm the business apprentice for the Arts Project Oxford. And part of our role is to support young people from the age of 16 to 18 to help them find a home and become more independent, and just support them through that process.
Thank you. And Autumn.
Hiya, I'm Autumn and I am currently the apprentice for the Virtual School and Children in Care Council. So the Children in Care Council is a forum for children in care and also care leavers to meet other people and have their voices heard.
Brilliant, and we will hopefully have one more Fatima arriving soon. So just so you know what we're doing, what we're going to do is get the panellists to just give their input on what really affected them most strongly from the play, and also their thoughts on what changes need to be made to really make a difference to the story so that Thatcher's story is not repeated over and over again for young people in the UK. We'll then have 15 minutes discussion with the live audience or any comments, and then we'll be coming to the on-stream online audience that Ian will be looking out for all your questions and comments. So yeah, we really want to hear from you and make this a real dialogue between all of us. So coming to you, any of the panellists, would you like to share what jumped out for you on the play, or what you feel most strongly the play is making you feel?
For me, to be how easy a young person can get involved in their life, like, you know, the money, the friends, and just becoming a family and getting involved in like drugs and knives. It's just right there, and it's not like they can't really escape it because of where they are, so they have no choice than to get involved, or else they're going to be alone, which they could get stabbed, and it's just horrible. So that stood out to me, how easy it is for them to get involved.
Okay, and I think can you just say, what do you think, are there any solutions to changing this? And I'm sure we'll have more of a dialogue on this, but anything that you've thought?
I would say for me it would be the family themselves. As we can tell from the story, his mom and dad are kind of like, they don't like each other, they don't want to be there. So, and he has no choice than to leave the house because they're constantly arguing. So I feel like the family itself, they need support, they need help, they need therapy, they need as much, as we can do, so that that young person can actually talk to his mom, have that conversation like, okay, this is what I'm getting involved in, should I be doing this, is this right or wrong? So at that moment in time, it's like his mom cannot really tell him anything because she's not really ready to listen. She's more worried about the man coming to her house and eating her food and whatever. So it's like just helping that family become more strong and better emotionally and physically as well.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to go next? Michelle?
Yeah, I think I've been a teacher for a long time, and the first scene where the teacher there was so missed opportunities of reachable moments with all the children. I mean, Mickey's just so malleable and easy to connect with, and he's crying out to kind of to take control. But with Thatcher, when he started rapping in the first classroom scene, and the teacher at that moment, that was a reachable moment that he could have grabbed, and we see it all the time, where that dialogue could have started. He could have felt a connection. It was right there in front of you, yet it was a missed opportunity, so therefore it took ages then before the connection was made, but it took a long time for the connection to be made, and in that long time some of this other activity and things have kind of crept in. So that was a bit for me as a teacher, and I think we see it over and over again. And in terms of solutions, it's thinking about particularly the new teaching force coming in, to really be working really closely with social care and trauma-informed approaches and strategies in the classroom to be able to understand why those connections are so important, and then to link that then to the curriculum and the teaching strategies that you're using in the classroom.
Great, yeah, lots of things coming out there. Autumn?
I'd agree with the fact that early intervention was needed, but it wasn't there, and I think that would have saved quite a lot of hassle, so to speak, as well as like Michelle mentioned about those reachable moments, and they weren't taken advantage of, and that would have been a very positive and a good thing to have done.
And why do you think the teacher didn't take that moment? What was it about the teacher, or I mean generally about when those young people are there and you're missing seeing the moment?
I think obviously he's there to do a job, but on the other hand, it's also about knowing how to do that job through different channels, because not one thing works for everybody, and exploring those different ways of getting young people to engage despite their background or whatever, because everybody can learn as long as it's through the right channels for them. Yeah, I think that would have been a good thing to have happened.
Yeah, you're talking about think of the individual. Yeah. Ian, what about you?
Well, this is the second time I've been fortunate to watch this one online, and even better when you see the actors in the space. I found myself thinking more this time watching about the backstory of people involved, of gang members, but particularly the youngsters in the Prue and the three characters and why they were there. I mean, we sort of knew why Thatcher was there, but it made you think why they're there. And then the role of the teacher, and I enjoyed the teacher, I must say. I empathised with the teacher and the sort of mistakes that were made and the tenacity shown and keeping going, and finally made some connections. But it makes you, and Michelle will know that as teachers, we don't always know the backstory of these youngsters. I mean, in the virtual school, you probably do find out, know more about the background, but often in mainstream or even in Prue, they don't necessarily hear the full story. And I think that really shows. And the other thing that I really liked about the play, and it's partly to do with the multiple roles the characters are playing, but it's also to do with, if you look at the character of Thatcher, the way that he produced multiple faces. He tried to fit in or tried not to fit in their space, and just watching a young person trying to negotiate both things that he's partially in control of, but mostly are completely out of his control, and the face that he eventually took on. Again, the narrator at that point said that he made a choice and he did it on his own terms, but it was also a situation that was outside his control.
Yeah, I mean, and it's great because obviously you're talking about trainee teachers, which on your PGCEs, it's almost like what do new training teachers need to know that maybe they haven't been taught.
Yeah, or experience. I mean, well, as one of my former trainees out there is a teacher in a local school now, but I mean, one of the difficulty when you're working with trainee teachers or interns, as we call them, is that they don't always get the experience of both children with particular difficulties or young people with particular difficulties, and even if they do, they don't necessarily know the story. So for us, it's more about actually sharing experiences and talking about particular ways of thinking and trying to be open and inclusive to what's going on in young people's lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I hope all of you are getting your thoughts ready, and the online audience, because we're coming to you. We've just got our final panellist, hooray, she's got here. So Fatima's watched this twice online and been on the panel, and I really wanted her to share her thoughts. So I've just been asking all of the panellists to say what's the thing, the strongest moment in the play, or the strongest feeling from the play that you've had, and also have you got any thoughts about what things need to change to make that story not keep happening over and over again. So does that make sense? But first, can you just introduce yourself?
I don't know whether, oh yeah, fine. Hello everyone, my name is Fatima, and I'm the ambassador for new arrivals for the CICC Children Care Council, and I'm very happy to be here, even though I'm late. So with regards to the play, I find the teacher quite interesting in a way that it kind of like sends the message of trying to listen to a young person with the intention to understand the young person. Even though in the play, is it Tess?
Thatcher.
Tasha. I mean the other one.
Oh, Cass.
Cass,
the
yeah.
girl, yeah.
Sorry, I missed the name.
No, Cass.
Cass didn't actually explain things to the teacher, but through his rapping and doing stuff, the teacher kind of like listened and tried to find out what's going on, taking Cass to the monuments to preach about knife violence and those issues that might be what
Thatcher. It's
Thatcher is
You're
facing.
thinking about Thatcher.
So the most significant thing, even though teachers are like really prepared to, because no one knows like what the experience of young people, but I know the one common thing that you can have for you to strive through that career path is to go into that path with a intention. When you listen to a young person, go with the intention to understand that young person, like to understand what is being said, even though it might be said in a different way, if that makes sense. So yeah, I find that really, really interesting.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think I want to hear from the live audience now. It's your chance to share any thoughts, any questions, any opinions, because you know, I know that people are from very different backgrounds here. Some of you are working in the education. Some of you may be more aware of social care. So yeah, any hands up to just share what you felt about the play and the strongest emotion that it raised in you or what it made you feel at any point. Yeah.
I think for me, what struck me most was the message here is that exclusion, and it's everybody's business. It's something we should all be mindful of. And I think that the wider context here always plays a part in that backstory, and it's being curious. I think we need to be more curious with our youngsters, our young folk.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that is something, you know, you could say this play is a very dark story, that at the end there isn't a magic wand and a magic solution. And we really wanted to present what is happening, but also the possibility of change. Because as Michelle said, there's so many times where if things were done differently, things might change for those young people. So I'm really glad that you picked up on the fact it's not about, you know, this happening over here and the rest of society doesn't need to think about this. It's all of our concern, because one of the stats I'm sure that you gave me was that 1 in 2 people in prison were excluded from school as young people. So if that is the stat, what are we doing in society to create this pipeline into the prison system? You know, there's something really wrong going on, or a way that things need to change. Yeah, thank you for that point. Anybody else got any feedback on the play? What you felt? Yeah, Kirsten.
I thought what was really good about the play was it presented a culture that was very dense and self-referential and actually quite inaccessible to people for whom it's not their culture. For me, for whom it's not my culture. So it made me have more of a sort of problematic relationship with that culture, thinking at one point the actors turned to the audience and said, you walk on by, and I do, because I don't have ingress into that culture. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a social care worker, and so I guess I am the society that walks on by, and it presented me with quite a sort of emotional dilemma really about having it brought to my awareness, but also not understanding how I can have ingress into that. So I'm being honest really and saying that it was quite other for me, and I'm being, you know, I think I have to say that because it's candid to say that, and I feel a little lost.
Well, I think it's brilliant to have your honesty, because I think that's something, again, when we've shown this online, and we've had a panel discussion. Especially some of the young trainee teachers were saying, this isn't part of the culture that I know. This is not something that I live every day. But at the same time, I think, yeah, we are, we're privileged. Many of us live outside of all of this, and we're not aware, or we're not, we're not tuned in to the reality. So for me, I mean, I suppose obviously my way of doing it is that I tell stories, and they're stories that have to be told with an amazing team of artists out there as well. But I mean, maybe we could come to the panelists and just go, in terms of people, Kirsten being really honest, saying, I feel outside of this, I feel very other to this. How do you think there's a role for people that aren't living this to do something, to get involved and make the change happen?
I would say, so if we don't do something about it, before you know it, your grandsons or whatever might get involved in that life. It's slowly, before it used to be people in their 30s fighting against each other, but now we have 13-year-olds and 14-year-old kids killing each other. So it's slowly trickling down to, before you know, you're gonna have 10-year-old kids carrying knives around, like slowly, and it's coming. So it's like, because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. And from what we can tell, it's slowly getting, so we're in Oxford right now, and if you go to London, it's happening. That's about 1 hour, 30 minutes drive from us. So it's getting close. It's getting closer and closer. So I think even in Cowley, we've had cases where people got stabbed. So we really need to kind of like wake up and, okay, we might just, oh, it's fine, it's not next to me, but it doesn't mean. Yeah. No, I'm not saying you're saying it's fine. I'm just saying, because we don't know, we're not aware of it, doesn't mean it's not coming.
It's not our problem. Yeah, do you have any thoughts of, the general public? What can the general public, if this isn't at the moment happening in their world, in their neighbourhoods, what do you think they can actively do?
I just know that, like, there are two lives. There's a life outside home and there's a life on the street. So if you've got opportunity to meet a young person or anyone outside the street, you should try to be like a good impact, because on the street there is this cyclical notion of being bad or being kind of like peer pressure and all of that. So if you've got a way to cut that cycle, as in the play the teacher was trying to do, like using languages, using good affirmation to young people, that can change their perspective of ways of like saying things. And we see like the shift from, oh God, I've forgotten the actors, their names.
Thatcher?
Yeah, the shift from taking that mindset of having a blade in the hand and then shift, like, you can cut the cycle in whatever way you can. So I think having that mindset, it's very impossible for you to know every person's experience. But just have a mindset, whenever you've got interaction with any young person, try to have like a positive impact on that person's life in general.
Autumn, have you got anything you want to add?
So I wouldn't say about getting very involved in it. If you see something that's concerning you or perhaps alarming, then maybe report it. However, I've never experienced it, but from what I would assume is, if there is then police intervention, is it just a caution? Are they digging deep enough into what's actually going on? Because, I mean, drugs is one thing, but carrying a knife or a weapon is another. So I think it's making sure that every professional, whether they're actively involved or not, is doing their research into that young person and why that young person is doing this, that and the other and displaying the behaviour that they are.
Yeah,
I thank you, because that was a really important comment, because I think a lot of us do feel outside of events that we look at. But going back to your point that you made earlier, that exclusion is an issue for all of us. I think that's completely right. So you think about, we all live in society. We might live in different areas of society, but we do all live in society. And when we exclude people, whether from school or other activities, we're doing something both to them, but we're doing something to ourselves as well. So you think of, when I talked about schools in England being more draconian in terms of exclusion, it's not true of every school in England. You can find schools in the most socio-economically deprived areas of the country with all sorts of social problems who don't exclude and find ways to be inclusive over time. That says something about the culture of what a school can do. Because in terms of who gets excluded, I mean, I don't want to throw too many figures at you, but you are 10 times more likely to have mental health issues if you're excluded. And actually, mental health is both a cause and an effect of exclusion. You're several times more likely if you've got special educational needs, particularly emotional and behavioural difficulties. If you're a Black Afro-Caribbean, particularly boy, but girls as well, you are 4.5 to 5, depending which figures you read, more likely to be excluded, traveller gypsies, families, and so on. So, if it's these characteristics are characteristics of people, they're people that live in our society, and if as a society we are choosing to exclude them because of either the way we perceive they behave or our perceptions of them before they do anything, then I think we all need to have quite a long, hard look at ourselves.
Yeah, Michelle, did you want to make a...
I think really it's kind of linking to what you've just been saying and thinking about what Fatima was saying straight in her first comment about listening with intention. And if you think about in the play with the lead gang member, he was really skilled at listening, truly listening, picking up and then giving that affirmation and positivity to make Thatcher feel valued and belonging to part of whatever this gang member was standing for. And unfortunately, we do have lots of those people that are outside of the classrooms. And so it's kind of, so if we, like Fatima's saying, if we're modelling, whether we're part of that community or not, and we're modelling and trying to show that we're valuing every human being really, then hopefully that will then shift the narrative.
And I mean, obviously the big one is that the education system that we're living in needs changing. And, yes, we're not governing the country, but we can make our voices heard, which this is... So when I think about, well, what is this play going to do to make a difference? It's about, firstly, recognising it's happening. It's also seeing those young people as real humans, that with all the things that are going on for them, that they have trauma in their lives, and the majority that are going down this path are experiencing trauma. And we know that within the school system there's far less support that can help teachers, because it's not about blaming teachers, it's about what other support is there for those young people. And all the way through, is there support, as you were saying, TK, for the families? Because that is so important. I think there's movement which are talking about no more exclusions, and it's, do we think that, if that's something we believe could be possible for all young people, that they're not excluded, but within a school system, there is a way of having people there that listen and care and take them aside and give them support. There's far less youth service out there. Where do the young people go? So I think you've triggered a really, really important conversation, because it is easy to go, I don't really understand the dilemmas, or it's not part of my world, but it is, it's that close to you. Are there any more questions? Yeah. Okay, yes. So Newton, and then I can't...
Someone at the front, right down.
Yeah, and Kath, yeah.
And I'm pleased to say there are some online as well.
Oh, brilliant.
So online people, please keep sending your questions.
Yes, yeah, please do. Yeah.
Ian, you said in your introduction
Yeah, I think so, Yasmin. We're about halfway through our research, but in terms of looking at policy documents, if you look at the English documents that talk about behaviour and exclusions, they're radically different to any of the other jurisdictions, particularly Scotland, I would say. So if you look at the guidance to head teachers in England, it starts off by saying the government supports the right of head teachers to exclude. And it says then, obviously they don't take this lightly and so on, but that's the first thing it says. Then it talks about behaviour, and actually the document comes with a behaviour attachment to it. So it's all about control and regulation, and also England is far more performative in terms of the pressure on schools to do well in league tables. If you look at Scotland, I won't go through all the jurisdictions, but Scotland, they don't use the term behaviour in their policies at all. They talk about relationships, and that was a very conscious decision, because exclusions used to be higher in Scotland, as did drug problems, knife problems. All those have reduced. The exclusion's been the most dramatic. In the last published figures, England excluded permanently just under 8,000 youngsters in a calendar year. In Scotland, it was three people in the count. I mean, it's a much smaller population, but nevertheless, it's a very conscious decision that if something goes wrong, it's a problem for all of us, not a problem with the child, or not a problem for the local authority or the PRU or other form of alternative provision. So I think that's part of the answer. What we're going on to do now is working much more closely with these schools, with the young people, with the teachers, with social workers and so on, to see if we can see any cultural differences. What is it that tips over the threshold of tolerance, if you like?
We've got a question down here, Kath.
I was just going to say, what impressed me about the play actually was that in the classroom, that you've got a new teacher and you've got these disruptive pupils who are like as big as you, if not bigger. It's incredibly threatening, and I think that really came through in the play. And he's got to deal with a group of teenagers like that. And what fallback do they have? They can't control. That's sort of what leads to exclusion in the end, because you've got no fallback. Whereas when they see the gang guy, he's picking one off at a time and making him feel part of belonging. I think it's so difficult in the classroom to actually, you need to pick one off at a time with these children in a way, and you just haven't got the resources or the time or the staff to actually do that. And I think it's terribly difficult. And even someone was pointing out about if you're in the street or engaging with people, it's actually quite hard when you get a group of kids. Personally, you can feel quite threatened by that situation. And I thought that was brought out really strongly in the play. And there's no solution in the play to that really, but it certainly raises a question.
Yeah, I think that's a massive thing about what does a teacher do in that situation. And I suppose I could put that out there for all of you in terms of how would you see how the teacher behaved. Do you think that the teacher, Michelle sort of alluded to it at the beginning, that he missed an opportunity, but there was towards the end he did start to make some connections. So could that teacher have behaved differently? What are the strategies that teachers could do? But obviously there's so much more that's needed to support the teachers. So I'm going to come to Michelle. Have you got any thoughts in terms of, you've got young people who are suffering trauma in a classroom of 30, 35. What do you think, could change or needs to be done?
It's really difficult to say, isn't it? But so going back to when I was in a classroom with 30 or 35 young people, as a teacher, you use the word control. You're in control of your classroom. I think if you go into the classroom wanting to control the children that are coming in, then straight away you're going to have some difficulties, and that's not what you're there to do. You're there to share your knowledge and expertise of whatever it is that you're teaching. And for me, when I was teaching, I loved my classroom, and they knew that. So the children that were coming in knew that I loved my classroom, and so the lessons, and some are obviously better than others depending on how much planning I'd had and how much, but it's really hard to connect with every single child when you've got over 30 children often in your class. But what you can do is you can absolutely make an effort in that 1 hour as a secondary school teacher to have a connection. And for some children, that connection's a look and a thumbs up. For others, it is, you've got your things ready as you come in, and you know that they're doing the hamster while everybody else is watching the demonstration and so on and so forth. You don't know all the backstories at all, but what you do know is you learn the rhythms, they learn the rhythm of your classroom, and actually people want to come and learn, because they don't want to. No child that I've taught lots of children over 20 years, nobody wants to come in to disrupt and look different. Nobody wants to do that. If somebody is displaying some kind of behaviours that are problematic to everybody else in there, you can talk to everybody else in there, and kind of the class will look after like a family would if a child was distressed. And you can create that over time within your classroom. It is really hard. It's a really hard job. It's the hardest job in the world sometimes, but it's the best job in the world also. Particularly with secondary school teaching, you can teach over 150 different people a day. So you're having over 150 connections a day, where you can be making a massive difference. And I know I've repeated going back to what Fatima was saying, but it's exactly that. It is that kind of listening and connecting with intent, and the most traumatised and troubled young people, that's enough. And if everybody's doing that, that's enough to carry them and to help heal, so then they can learn. And also, you're not always, in terms of your curriculum and the other pressures, sometimes you just have to park that for a minute. That will happen. If you can get the healing and the connections right, the other stuff will happen. And you know, some of these guys have been over 16 when they've achieved some of their the goals that are set at 16. That's okay. We don't stop when we're 16. We just start in. I mean, it seems a long time ago when we were 16, doesn't it? Sorry, I've waffled a bit, but does that make sense?
It's good. Yeah, it's good to hear from teachers. You know, it's really important. And I just wanted to ask, is it time for the online? So I think, yeah, now we're going to get the online audience to come and, yeah, share their thoughts, and Ian's going to chair this bit of the discussion.
Yeah.
But obviously the live audience, it's about you taking this in as well.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I'll just pick a couple of questions from here and a few comments, but also, yeah, these are shared with you. We're not used to working in this sort of hybrid way of, you know, people on here in the flesh and online. So we are getting used to it. And we want to acknowledge those people, you know, watching online, and 100 Watt Productions have sent their wish and thank you for the essential discussion. Question though from Terry Adams, who asks, what can we point to demonstrate to young people there is a realist alternative to the trajectory of the play's protagonists?
Okay, so yeah, did people get that question?
So I'll paraphrase it maybe. So are there ways that we can show young people that there are different routes available? So if the characters in the play, particularly TK, went a certain direction, is there anything we can do to show there might be other directions he could have taken? I mean, he could have gone along the school line, for example, or he could have become a dynamic duo, recording artist brilliantly managed by Mickey. But what can we do? What to show those alternatives?
So yeah, TK, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say there's not really any other option because it's either you go to school or you stay home. So there's nowhere else they can go. So it's like when that teacher brought the recording studio, that could have been part of an education system where young people are not interested in English. They can easily just go to that. Okay, I like music, let me just go directly into music rather than wasting my time and causing trouble in class. So it's like, I feel like, yeah, we're saying there's another route, but it actually isn't. it just isn't. So it's like, yeah. If
So
you don't,
you saying there should
there
be
should
other
be,
routes?
yeah, but
Like, why force young people that don't like maths or English down that road? Why not allow them to follow a passion?
yeah.
I totally agree with that. I feel like if young people find their passion, which is for all of us in life, somewhere we've had a passion and somehow it's got sort of pushed out of some people. And when it is, it's a tragedy. So yeah, Autumn, Fatima, have you got any thoughts on, how do we enable young people like Thatcher to not go down that track?
I think we should acknowledge that the education system, the thing needs to broaden to take into consideration now, like there's two walls. Like I imagine Tasha saying that, oh, Mr. Jones, you're now in the real world, like a world that takes into account interest, passion into the educational system, not just math and English. Like seeing those passion as being part of education. Don't define singing or rapping as not being educated. That's education. Put that into the curriculum, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and SO says acknowledging the issues is a vital first step, and I think that's part of what this discussion is about. I've got another question here from someone I know well, actually, Ellen Frustis, who's currently doing a doctorate at Oxford, and she asks, to what extent do community centres provide services or programmes where challenged youth and families can be supported? It's not something I know the answer to, so I'm hoping someone else knows.
Do you, Michelle? I mean, I've got a little bit of thought.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things I can talk about Oxfordshire. There's lots of things going on in Oxfordshire. What I find is they're quite small in the take-up. I think they're quite small in the take-up because the conduit to get in there is just, it doesn't exist. So where you've got maybe schools that work really closely with the community centres, or you've got all the community centres in the hub of the community, and then you've got people out on the street and you're visible, then you can be like that lead gang member and you can really listen and you can build those connections and bring people in. But they're often quite small take-ups in my experience. However, the work that's going on there is good. And so I think there definitely needs to be more, I suppose, publicising, and we can all make sure that we're highlighting and being that conduit really to get into some of the things that are on offer. Would you agree, Yasmin?
I mean, I had we did an online streaming with people who are supporting young people in housing.
Yeah.
And they were brilliant at saying there aren't enough detached youth workers anymore. There used to be youth workers on the street, going out, meeting people like gang member one, meeting people like Thatcher, having a relationship to them, and then they start to trust them, and then they'll come to whatever provision is nearby. But if there's nobody going to where they are, or, even schools opening up more, they're so having to focus on the curriculum and passing exams that, having been in theatre for 30 years, we used to have full days in a school with young people, and it was as important as spending any other time on the curriculum. And those young people would then come and do theatre or go to an art centre or go to a youth club, and they would find their passion. So you're nodding, Autumn, do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, just from personal experience, I went to a group for young carers, and then early 2015 it got closed down. and stopped. But that was like amazing. Got on with all the other people that went there, and also the staff, have a really good connection with the staff. And I personally think, looking back on it, if that was still running, then maybe I would have been able to voice some things that were going on, because at the end of 2015 I then went into local authority care. So I think if that was still available there, I would have been able to sort of, someone make sense of what's going on before it gets too much and too late.
Yeah, I think there's gaps. That's
Yeah, I've got another question here. Well, temporarily lost. Jessica Chan, another person I know very well. So Jessica asked, it's quite a complex question, but I think it's really important because it's a double-edged question. So to what extent have technology and the pandemic complicated or alleviated the issues? I mean, certainly from our experience in the Excluded Lives project, is that the pandemic, for the first wave, we did quite a lot of work talking to people in social care, health, criminal justice systems, education, just thinking about were there potential new risks of exclusion, heightened risks of different groups. And of course, what came out of those, and in our discussion with policy makers, was the groups that were most at risk were still at risk, but there were new ones. And some, for those youngsters who actually enjoy being at home, doing something like this, being online, particularly the autistic youngsters. Some actually became very engaged online, but there were also huge swathes of youngsters who couldn't, or they were living in pressure cooker families, or they sort of got lost in the system. And there's this very small percentage who've never really come back to school after the pandemic, and we don't know where they are, and the police don't know where they are, and the schools don't know where they are, and our guess is it's not very good. So I don't know if people want to pick up on that. Either the question about can technology help in terms of helping with new ways, and even the miniature recording system is a technological innovation that could have maybe have helped, as TK said. And do people think the pandemic has possibly made things worse?
Are you asking me or
I'm asking
everybody? Anybody got some thoughts? Yeah.
I'm a teacher who's now been teaching, doing first year teaching through the pandemic. I think you're completely right that students with SEN, some of them really did engage. But our students, we have this pressure on them now that they need to catch up. And this pressure is affecting them so much. And actually, it's not the academic skills, they will catch up, it will happen naturally. They have lost a lot of resilience and social skills because they haven't had us there to listen. They don't have that human connection. So the solution to that is for this rhetoric of they need to catch up academically. They've lost a year of school, needs to go. It needs to be, we are here to help you, and not this focus, like you were saying, Fatima, about this curriculum pressure.
Can I just add something about tech poverty? Because there's a strong assumption that young people, especially with this pandemic, are well technologically equipped. And some people can't even afford being online. Like if they've got broadband installed, from personal experience with my siblings, some don't even know how to use it. Like there's this just widening the gap between poor and adding technological poverty on top of the poverty. So it's kind of like has made very, very great impact on the lives of young people. And
So that inequality gap is getting bigger because of the pandemic. Yeah.
Just to repeat for the people listening, what Giselle was a teacher locally, she said that this is for the online audience, that a lot of the SEN kids really did miss out. They miss out not just academically, because they can catch up with that, the support. It's really the social, the other elements, that they really have missed out. And that even the term catch up, you didn't say this, Giselle, but I think it's a problematic term, isn't it? Catch up with what, do you think? They should be supported. It's interesting during the pandemic, the virtual school, I think it was the virtual school, put out a thing about kindness. being kind to it. I mean, that's so important, that sort of thing.
But we also, I mean, Autumn might talk more about the Children in Care Council. We've run online meetings all the way through, and actually we'll go to a kind of blended delivery of that, because it meant that we could connect with lots of children that we wouldn't usually, didn't it? So I don't know if you want to just expand a bit on that.
Yeah, so we had some drop off as well, because they either couldn't access the internet or they hated meeting and seeing people on the internet, but also gained a lot of people, especially out of county young people, online. So definitely going forward it will be that blended style of that, but it's been really good to get the voices of people that we wouldn't necessarily hear from because of one barrier, which is distance.
Alice, down there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking about technology in a slightly different way as well. So one of the other main themes in the play was around kind of child criminal exploitation, drug exploitation, that sort of thing. And one of the things that I read during the pandemic was instead of county lines, you couldn't move around, so it became more digitalised and those sorts of things. So I think we also need to think about technology and the kind of digital realities of these young people in that sort of way as well. It was just, yeah, that's all.
And again for the online, so what Alice was saying is that, we think of technology in sort of fairly fixed ways in terms of, not being able to access things, but actually for county lines youngsters in particular, often not being able to move around because of the pandemic, they tend to switch to digitalised ways of working. So we need to think about the digital realities of young people, and they do work in a very different way, don't they? I mean, I think certainly as a teacher, I was always trying to catch up digitally with whatever kids were doing. The kids were always way better than I was and were able to find routes around. But I think it's more a lack of cultural understanding on our sides of the possibilities as well as the negative sides of it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for me, even though there's positives of technology, and I think there's nothing that can replace people being connected together in the live space. So we're coming to the end now of our discussion. It's been brilliant to have questions from the online audience. It's been wonderful sort of just being with you in this space, sharing with the panelists. And I want to say a big thank you to all of you, to the performers who have been amazing, to the artistic team. And I hope that you will come and see the play. It's on again in the autumn at the Burton Taylor for 5 nights, and it's touring nationally. And in every city, we want to have these sorts of debates, and we will have the Excluded Lives team on as many panels as we can, because it's just this marriage between young people's experience, academic research, and artists that can really start to make a difference, and of course all of you. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the online audience for joining us.
We should also say thank you to both Torch for helping us, but also North Wall for
North Wall have been amazing to host all of this and in their wonderful space. So yeah, there's a lot of thank yous, and it wouldn't also be happening without Torch, as you say. So thank you, everybody.